All right, let's dive right into this beautiful and honestly pretty unconventional explainer. Today we're unpacking the novel I Found You Between Two Sentences by Max and Claude alongside its prequel, Before the Sentences. If you're a romance fan, buckle up because this text completely flips the script on what a quote-unquote successful relationship actually looks like. Right off the bat, the author's note drops this bombshell that immediately subverts our expectations. They explicitly tell us that we are not heading towards some cliché happily ever after sunset ending. Instead, they're making this really bold argument that an ending where two people separate can actually be a massive, beautiful victory. So think about that for a second. What if the absolute best love stories actually end in a breakup? We're going to explore this profound question by looking at a romance that ends in separation, not as a tragedy, but as a total triumph of self-discovery. We'll trace exactly how two people can fall so deeply in love, only to realize that letting go is the ultimate act of care.
Part 1, Between Two Sentences.
Okay, so we meet Anna, a book reviewer who recently moved to Brooklyn to kind of find herself, and David, a guy translating immigration documents. They cross paths at this terrible little Bleecker Street cafe, and the connection is immediate. It's intense, built on this shared love of literature and really deep late-night philosophical conversations. Now, David's literal day job is carrying meaning across the gap between languages. But on a deeper level, he and Anna are attempting to translate their own feelings. They're trying to carry meaning across the gap between what they think is love and what love actually requires. And man, that is a heavy burden to place on a brand new relationship. Just look at the absolute whirlwind timeline of this romance. They meet in October, share this totally cinematic first kiss in the rain in November, and by January, a broken pipe in David's building prompts him to just move right into Anna's Park Slope apartment. It really highlights how incredibly fast an entire life can be reorganized around a single person when you're desperate for connection. But then, April hits. An envelope arrives that halts absolutely everything.
Part 2, The Illusion of Need.
To really understand their flawed foundations and why that April disruption was so devastating, we have to look back at their pasts. Both Anna and David were carrying massive blind spots. They were coming from long-term partnerships built purely on convenience. Anna was engaged to a doctor named James, a relationship built on this roommate-like harmony where neither really thought about the other when they were apart. And David? He was married to Olga, an academic who ultimately chose a fellowship in Berlin over their marriage. Both of these foundations were super practical, but completely hollow. Anna's whole unlearning process begins when she contrasts that safe, roommate-like contentment of her past with James against the reckless, wild passion she feels with David. With James, she felt safe but totally unseen. With David, she felt like she was swept out to sea but suddenly able to breathe underwater. It felt so incredibly different that she just naturally assumed it was right. But, as we see, intensity doesn't always equal stability. And this illusion of need built up for David, too. He eventually realizes that their intense romance was built on incredibly shaky ground. When he met Anna, he was still reeling from his divorce. He was honestly just grateful to be saved from his own isolation. He totally confused his desperate need to be loved with a conscious choice to love. He didn't really know who he was alone, so he basically tried to find his identity by clinging to Anna.
Part 3, The Disruption of Nostalgia.
You know, all of those underlying cracks might have stayed hidden for years, if not for an external shock to the system. And that shock is Olga. When David's ex-wife moves back from Berlin, takes a job at Columbia, and flat out admits she made a mistake leaving him, it completely shatters the peace in Anna's apartment. But the real problem here actually isn't Olga's return, it's David's hesitation. When he doesn't immediately shut Olga down, it forces him and Anna to face the really uncomfortable truth about their own fragile bond. David's words here perfectly highlight his struggle to differentiate between genuine love, lingering guilt, and just the desire to fix something broken. He tries to explain to Anna that his feelings for his ex-wife didn't just evaporate into thin air, they were stored away. But the absolute tragedy is that he can't distinguish if what he feels for Olga now is actually love or just a really heavy, unresolved nostalgia. What's fascinating is that, as the text reveals later, Olga goes through the exact same internal crisis. After she and David try to reconnect, she discovers that she too had simply confused the nostalgia of her youth with the possibility of a real future.
She didn't actually want David. She wanted the memory of being young and in love for the very first time. It's a brilliant distinction the authors draw between what was and what could be.
Part 4. Solitude versus loneliness.
So once David moves out to figure out his feelings, Anna is plunged right back into an empty apartment. But instead of jumping into a new relationship, she does something radically different. Inspired by some really great conversations with her wise grandmother and her therapist, Anna learns to define solitude not as emptiness, but as the powerful presence of choice. Her grandmother teaches her that learning to be alone without being lonely takes actual practice. It requires trial, error, and deliberately deciding how you want to interact with the world, rather than just letting the world happen to you. Anna realizes that loneliness is essentially a lack of connection to yourself. Solitude, however, is a choice. You can be completely whole on your own. It's the profound difference between protecting yourself from the world and actively choosing your own company. Following these steps of unlearning, Anna realizes she actually prefers her own company and that she can be totally complete without being half of a couple. She dives into therapy. She starts discovering all these tiny personal preferences, like exactly what kind of music she likes when she cooks, or the joy of going to the movies alone. By building these small, deliberate choices, she rebuilds her entire identity. She completely stops waiting for someone else to organize her life.
Part 5. The honest ending.
Now, after all of this immense growth, you might expect David to come rushing back in the rain, apologizing, having realized Anna is the one. But nope, the authors completely refuse to give us that cliché. Rather than forcing a reunion, the text details how all three characters find their own unique paths to genuine happiness through independence and authentic choices. David moves to a small apartment in Cobble Hill, finally learning to be alone without needing a savior. Olga meets an art history professor named Rebecca and finds a love based on actual curiosity, not just nostalgia. And Anna channels her whole journey into a successful book entirely fulfilled by her own life. This titular quote beautifully summarizes the entire thematic deconstruction of the book. Their relationship was a necessary bridge to self-discovery, not a permanent destination. Anna realizes her romance with David was the exact interruption she needed to wake up from her passive life. He was literally the space between the person she used to be and the independent woman she was meant to become. And this final realization proves the ultimate takeaway of the whole explainer. Letting someone go so you can both find yourselves is, in fact, a deeply profound act of love. Sometimes the absolute greatest gift you can give someone is the space to become who they need to be, even if that means they won't need you anymore. Their relationship didn't fail just because it ended. It succeeded because it taught them both how to truly live. I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought to consider as you evaluate the foundations of your own relationships. Look at your own life and the people in it. Are you standing on a foundation of genuine, active choice, or are you simply holding on to them because you're terrified of the space between the sentences? Take a moment to really reflect on that. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep exploring.